What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back from New York Comic-Con. And as you may have noticed, my voice sounds a little weird. I am not sick. I am actually in the process of losing my voice. And so in this video, I'll sound a little bit different than I normally do, simply because I'm keeping things a little low-key. I don't want to destroy my voice in its entirety, because that is my source of income. But before we jump into this, something I want to do is I want to draw your eyes to the description of the video. And in the description, you'll actually find an updated schedule for the release of my videos, simply because for the last few months, I've just been kind of throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. And I've got a better idea of the kind of stuff that you guys like, the kind of things that grow my channel, so on and so forth. And so you'll see an update. You'll see things like days dedicated to all new, all different Marvel, and then a day dedicated to DC Rebirth. You'll see a day dedicated to Star Wars and a day dedicated to indie comics, including Valiant and Spawn and so on and so forth. And what that'll do is it'll give you a day out of the week. If all you really are interested in is DC Comics, it'll give you one day to always expect DC related content, specifically in related to DC Rebirth. But I also recognize that a lot of you all like older stories. A lot of you guys like, Onslaught Saga or Jonathan Hickman's run of Avengers and New Avengers. And so I've dedicated the day for throwbacks, Throwback Thursday. Kind of made sense to me. And that'll be the day that we focus on classic stories. We focus on things that took place before all new, all different Marvel and DC Rebirth. So with that being said, in this video, I want to have a discussion on Green Lanterns, because I got to tell you, Sam Humphries knows how to write one hell of a story. With Green Lanterns Rebirth, we're basically focusing on the events, or I guess the lives, of Simon Baz and Jessica Cruz. Now, on its face, when I first read Green Lanterns Rebirth, it didn't really seem to resonate with me, but I'm always of the mind, give everything a chance, give it one story arc, and if it doesn't really pick up from there, then you may want to shift your focus. And so, Sam Humphries is sometimes good, sometimes bad, but with this story, he is amazing. So for those of you guys who are familiar with the Green Lantern mythos, bear with me for a second while I run over this for those who are not. So for the most part, when the question's asked where to start with the Green Lantern, the easiest response is basically Jeff Johns' entire run. It's really unavoidable. There's really no way to get around that. It's the quintessential example when someone asks, what should I start with if I want to read, Secret Wars or All New, All Different Marvel? You start with Jonathan Hickman's entire run on Avengers and New Avengers. It's just one of those things that you can't skip over. It's one of those things that you have to read the entirety of. Fortunately for us, because DC Rebirth is designed to be a jumping off platform for a lot of individuals, the entire run of Jeff Johns' Green Lantern is really more essential for Hal Jordan and the Green Lanterns than it is for Green Lanterns with Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz. And what I mean by that is, within this particular storyline, because we focus on their characters, Sam Humphries does an incredible job of giving us a place to start. For those of you guys who are not familiar, the Red Lanterns were they were the first after the Guardians of the Universe to be able to tap into the emotional spectrum. And this was really rooted in the creation of the Green Lanterns. In their early history, the Guardians of the Universe sort of rose to prominence and saw themselves as quite literally protectors of the universe. And so the goal was to create a peacekeeping force that could serve this purpose, that could police the universe and ensure that there was no one threat that would arise that could lay waste to all of reality. And so what they did is they created a group of androids called the Manhunters. Well, the issue with this was, depending on which story you read, either the former Owen Krona had sort of, meddled with the Manhunters and screwed up their programming, or the Manhunters had basically become sentient on their own. But regardless of which stance you take, the result is that the Manhunters began cutting a swath through the universe, and they ended up running up on a planet which was housed by a guy named Atrocitus and his family. When the Manhunters started tearing through, what they did is they killed a multitude of people. And so Atrocitus, along with a handful of other survivors, came together and formed what would eventually become the Red Lantern Corps. Now, this took place, as far as I know chronologically, before the Green Lanterns, but the fact remains that the Red Lanterns imbued themselves with rage. They quite literally fed on their anger and their hate. The caveat to this was that Atrocitus was the only one that really maintained his mental faculties. If a person came under control of a Red Lantern ring, they would quite literally just go insane, and they would just operate as a person who was insane. That doesn't mean they couldn't do what they were told. It simply just means they could maintain higher brain function. Now, the Red Lanterns were a core part of of Jeff Johns' Green Lantern mythos, especially when it came to retelling the origins of the Green Lanterns. The issue was that once this mythos came to an end, DC didn't really seem to know what to do with them. And so the Red Lanterns were kind of relegated to the back, and there's mixed opinions when it comes to the Red Lanterns in the New 52, but the fact remains that there came a point whereby the villain Krona had effectively been killed. And because Krona was the basis behind Atrocitus forming the Red Lanterns and taking revenge against the Guardians of the Universe and the Green Lantern Corps, with Krona being dead, the purpose behind the Red Lanterns was lost. And so what Atrocitus did is he basically basically gave his Red Lanterns their sanity back, gave them the ability to function at a normal level, you know, as we would with their respective races. The issue here is that almost as soon as this happened, they began plotting, you know, mutiny. They began to devise plans to overthrow Atrocitus. And what this did is it led into what's called the Red Lantern Civil War. Of course, you had one side with Atrocitus, the other side with Guy Gardner, the former Green Lantern, and this was just a way for DC to thin the herd. It was basically a way for DC to just kind of eliminate their ranks almost in their entirety. And so what Green Lanterns does is it picks up with this. And it was the great villain for the Green Lanterns to go against, because it's not the entire might of the Red Lantern Corps. Instead, it's really just Atrocitus and Bleeze. Now, Bleeze, of course, was a former princess, but she was considered to be the greatest of the Red Lanterns. But like any great story, Sam Humphries does not immediately tell us everything that's going on. Instead, what he does is he starts giving us little tidbits. Because of the fact that Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz were basically left on Earth while Hal Jordan traversed the spaceways in order to find the lost Green Lantern Corps, which is a whole different discussion in and of itself, the idea here was that neither of them really had a strong understanding of what to do. Now, this is a big difference here, because one of the things that Sam Humphries is going to focus on over the course of this story is really Jessica Cruz. She's going to be the main emphasis here, and I love the way he does this. I think Sam Humphries is a bit preachy from time to time, but he still does a great job, and we'll talk about this as we go through this story. But initially, all we really find here is that Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz show up at the house of a guy who's just kind of engaging in a series of ramblings, and he's hell-bent on rage. Now, he keeps referring to something called the Tower and talking about how he did his job at the orders of the Blue Woman. Now, of course, we know the Blue Woman is Bleeze, and this is just really kind of a form of irony whereby we know what's going on, or seem to know what's going on, but neither Jessica Cruz nor Simon Baz seem to know what's going on. And so the result here is that once they enter this individual's home, you know, after he seems to have been killed, we also find that not only has he killed somebody else and strung them up, but he's also been stockpiling bodies. And so once they call the authorities in, the Lantern Rings immediately start signaling off and start talking about a code red. Now, this is kind of the universal standard with Green Lanterns in the sense that there are red lanterns around here. But again, because of the fact that Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz are not well versed in red lanterns, they're basically experiencing a lot of this for the very first time. And so what happens is this Hell Tower seems to emerge, and while they do create somewhat of a protective sphere, the individuals who were exposed to this gonging sound that the Hell Tower was making initially seem to be overcome with rage. And so what we do is we jump to the planet Ismalt, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but we pick up with Atrocitus. And again, because Bleeze has had her sanity restored to her, she is basically the right-hand man, or the right-hand woman, so to speak, of Atrocitus at the moment. But Atrocitus keeps talking about a prophecy. He keeps talking about how the Red Lanterns will rise again. Now, we're not really given any real explanation here by Sam Humphries what he's referring to, because he's actually saving this for the rest of the story. But we end up jumping forward to Jessica Cruz as she's spending time with her sister. Now, this is one of the reasons why I think Sam Humphries is so good at what he does, because we get a back and forth between the two. Again, a lot of this focuses on Jessica Cruz, but we see that her sister is a major focal point of their life. They have a strong relationship, a strong connection with one another. It's really, they really feed off each other's confidence. The issue here is that Jessica Cruz lacks a lot of confidence in terms of her perception and how she views herself with the world. Now, again, Sam Humphries will focus on this a lot, and it's really kind of preachy here. The problem is that in the midst of her spending time with her sister, when we jump to Simon Baz, he experiences what's called Emerald Sight. Now, Emerald Sight is something that's occurred before, but to the best of my knowledge, there doesn't really seem to be a whole lot of emphasis here. And this is one of the cool things that DC's doing with Simon Baz. With regards to the Green Lantern mythos, up until the creation of Hal Jordan, to be honest, there wasn't much there. And Hal Jordan was used as a way to segue into this huge expansive universe and offer us all these different kinds of concepts. When Simon Baz was introduced, one of the issues that a lot of fans had was, with the Red Lantern Corps, the Blue Lantern Corps, the Indigo Corps, so on and so forth, they all had their own unique history. They all had their own unique heritage in terms of how they came about, how they first tapped into the emotional spectrum. But Simon Baz was just kind of thrown to us as a guy who became a Green Lantern. And while his induction into the Corps is very similar to John Stewart, very similar to Guy Gardner, the issue here is that Stewart and Gardner have history. They have a lot of legacy going on there. Simon Baz does not. And so in the age of such huge expansions to the Green Lantern mythos, fans wanted to see a little bit more. And this is what DC is doing. DC has basically been offering up to us as fans the idea that there's a lot more to Simon Baz than meets the eye, that he has a whole plethora of powers that are still being explored in the DC landscape, that are still being offered up. Now, this is really just a way to bolster up his character, to just kind of increase him so that he can rise to prominence and draw in fan interest. Whether or not it will succeed is something that we'll just have to wait and see, but because Green Lantern, the entire Green Lantern concept, seems to be so popular, I have no doubt that Simon Baz will strike a chord in a lot of fans and come to be a character that they will love alongside virtually everybody else. But switching back to Jessica Cruz, again, because this giant gonging sound is going on, it seems, throughout the world, the entire, grocery store's inhabitants seem to lose their sanity and succumb entirely to their rage. And so what we do is we switch over to Atrocitus and realize this is all part of his plan. Atrocitus seems to be engaging in a series of campaigns designed to basically take over the world, to take over Earth, and to have the Red Lantern Corps re-emerge on Earth as the newest incarnation of that group, to basically restore the Red Lantern Corps to its previous glory. And so what we do here is we switch back to the Hell Tower. Now, this is a really interesting situation, and the reason why is because prior to the events that we've just talked about, Argus had basically taken over jurisdiction of the Hell Tower and basically ran off Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Argus is basically, they're kind of an interesting situation because there really isn't, at least not that I can think of off the top of my head, there really doesn't seem to be an analogy or I guess an equivalent in Marvel Comics. The closest I can think of is S.H.I.E.L.D. But the fact remains that Argus is basically an organization headed up by Amanda Waller and is designed to be a liaison of sorts to the Justice League in the sense that Argus provides information on the various goings on around the world so that the Justice League can make the right kind of decisions tactically in terms of what problems they face and what problems they allow lesser superheroes to deal with. But the issue here for Jessica Cruz is not so much that the entirety of the grocery store is succumbed with rage, it's the fact that her sister Sarah is succumbed with rage. Now, Simon Baz shows up to her rescue and Simon Baz is able to get her out of there, but for Jessica Cruz, she doesn't want to leave. And again, this is important for Jessica because as a character that witnessed her friends being killed, as a character that lived as a recluse for 3 years, refusing to leave her home, her sister Sarah is kind of her link to life. And so to lose that would be like Jessica Cruz losing everything around her. And it would seem as though she would have no purpose. And so while she petitions Simon Baz to let her go, in the end, she basically jumps out of the vehicle, out of the construct that Simon Baz had made, and she immediately heads back. The problem here is it seems as though Sarah is beyond redemption. Sarah is not at a point whereby she can help, Jessica Cruz. And this is, again, a huge moment here because for Jessica, it's essential that she's able to do this. Now, something else that I also want to point out is that Sam Humphries uses this lack of confidence Jessica has to talk about her ability to create constructs. And this is a central focal point between, in the relationship between Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz, in the sense that Jessica Cruz cannot actually make constructs yet. Now, there's a reason for this. Because of the fact that she imbued a power ring, which of course is the Earth 3 equivalent to the Green Lantern, that ring had initially embodied the spirit of Volthoom. And Volthoom would constantly taunt Jessica Cruz, would constantly give her a hard time, would constantly make life a nightmare for her. And so in addition to the fact that she had witnessed her friend's murder, that she had gone and become a recluse, what little confidence she could have had was routinely stripped away from her by Volthoom. And the result is that she's a Green Lantern, but she doesn't believe that she is. She doesn't believe that she has a skill set to be one, and she doesn't know why she was chosen. And so the result is she does what she can, but in the end, the constructs that she make almost always fail. And so while she tries to deal with her sister, Simon Baz again comes to the rescue, but also seems to be giving her a hard time, saying that there's no reason she should be a Green Lantern. She's basically a hassle. She draws everybody down. She's more of a hindrance than a help. Now, this is kind of ironic here because, with the Red Lanterns effectively taking over the world or seeming to take over the world, Simon Baz needs all the help he can get. The issue here is that the Justice League is currently dealing with their own threats. Hal Jordan is off planet, and so while the two of them are officially part of the League per se, they can't really call on the League to help them in this conflict. And so what we do here as we continue our story is we pick up with Atrocitus and Bleez making landfall on Earth. Now again, because of the fact that the Red Lantern rings latch onto those individuals who have rage in their heart, their first encounter, comes across a farmer with a shotgun and it looks like his son or his grandson. And initially Atrocitus says they have hate and they will be some of the first to be among his ranks when he takes over the Earth. Now, this isn't really designed to be anything huge from Sam Humphries. This is simply just him solidifying our knowledge or ensuring us that the basis behind this, or basis behind Atrocitus, is to attack the planet Earth. And so jumping back to Simon Baz and Jessica Cruz, one of the things that I also hope you guys notice here is that Simon Baz routinely creates a gun using his ring. Now, this is something that we'll actually see in the next video that we do on Green Lanterns as part of the one-off story arc called The Gun. But while they're trying to find a way to solve this issue with Earth, one of the big problems here is that they're always reminded by their ring the number of people who were succumbing to rage. Now, this number is pretty small. We're talking about at this moment, 2,904 people on a planet of billions of people. The issue with this is that rage is in and of itself infectious. Not only that, the emotional spectrum is what powers powers, you know, all the lantern cores. And so rage can lead to fear, and fear could very well present a situation whereby Sinestro could just show up for whatever reason and just initiate a full-scale war on Earth between the Red Lanterns and the Sinestro Corps, which could lead to a whole huge mess that neither Simon Baz, Jessica Cruz, nor the Justice League could probably deal with on their own. But while they're in the midst of trying to get things sorted out, they're actually met by Bleez, who arrives at the behest of Atrocitus. Now, this is one of the coolest moments in the entire story of Green Lanterns, and this is what threw me off so bad. Because for Bleez, she's used to going against Hal Jordan, and as we know, Hal Jordan is, you know, quite possibly the best of the Green Lanterns, if not definitively the best of the Green Lanterns. And so, you know, when Bleez shows up, she's used to dealing with threats that are far more formidable than either Simon Baz or Jessica Cruz. And so, in truth, they're kind of out of their league here, but we're actually going to find that the powers of Simon Baz are pretty significant. But before we jump into that, what we do is we jump back to the family of Simon Baz, and we meet up with just a random Guardian of the Universe who requests Hal Jordan or John Stewart. Now, this is basically Sam Humphries teasing a future story arc that's actually going to revolve around something called the Phantom Ring, a new concept in DC Rebirth, which I'm actually really excited for. But what we do is we actually jump back to Simon Baz himself and Bleez attempting to overtake his mind with rage. And this is a very big situation here, because when Jeff Johns introduced Simon Baz, what he was wanting to do is create a relatable character that deals with everyday problems. And in the wake of 9/11, which was had a huge impact on Jeff Johns' life, if I can be so bold to say that, you know, Simon Baz was designed to be a reflection of a lot of the anti-Muslim views that existed in the United States. Now, I'm not going to get political here, and I'm not going to argue one way or the other, but the fact remains that the way that he was raised, the environment that he was in, impacted his view of the world. And in his mind, there were a lot of injustices that he had experienced. You know, there were a lot of things where people seemed to give him a hard time unnecessarily, and he always kept this rage sort of built up in his mind, but he never really did anything with it. He always kept it pushed in the back and just kept going forward. The issue here is that Bleez tries to tap into this. She tries to tap into this rage that he has, but Simon Baz actually casts her off. Now, this is something that we rarely ever see, not necessarily someone casting off rage, but what happens next. In the Green Lantern mythos, the Blue Lanterns are really the only ones that can cure someone of being a Red Lantern. If, for example, someone who is a Red Lantern were to take their ring off, it would kill them. They would just die. The issue here is that while there are different ways to allow someone to move along the path of leaving the Red Lantern Corps, in the end, a Blue Lantern is always needed for them to survive the experience. But what Simon Baz does here is he not only casts off, you know, Bleez's attempt to make him a Red Lantern, he actually purifies her of the Red Lantern infection, and she survives, which is something that we've never seen before. This is wholly new. This is why I say DC's going about the road of giving new powers to Simon Baz. And even Bleez herself says this is crazy. She's never heard of this happening before. Every time this always happened, people always died. But her reaction is one of both curiosity and fear. She doesn't really know what to do here. She still has rage to a degree, but she's also completely and totally free of the control of Atrocitus. Now, initially Simon tries to reason with her. Simon tries to break away from this, or I guess try to break her away from her rage, you know, bring her back to the realm of sanity. But the issue here is that Jessica Cruz shows up almost immediately after this happens and attacks Bleez, viewing her as a villain. And so this attempt that Simon Baz made to bring Bleez back ultimately fails, and she takes off under the auspices that if Atrocitus learns that she was cured of her Red Lantern abilities without dying, that he would kill her, simply because Atrocitus wouldn't want anybody to know this was possible. And so because of the fact that Jessica Cruz basically screwed this up, this again creates more of a rift between the two, in the sense that they start fighting against one another, they start arguing, but of course their rings sort of chime in, and their rings make the case that the infection is continuing to spread, that people all over the world are continuing to succumb to their rage. And so while the two of them set about trying to attack the Hell Tower, ultimately believing that this is the source of the rage that's spreading across the planet, once they arrive, Jessica Cruz has succumbed in her entirety and attacks Simon Baz. Now, while Jessica Cruz does not become a full-on Red Lantern, this conflict between the two of them is extremely important. And this is really just Sam Humphries showing us the character of Jessica Cruz. This, in my mind, is really kind of the epitome of where her rage in the world stands. And what I mean here is that for her character, she hates being a Green Lantern because she doesn't know why she was chosen. She sees herself weak. She sees herself not really a Green Lantern because she can't make constructs. She feels as though on her own personal level, in her own personal way, that she's been thrust in the role of a superhero hero against her will after having been thrust into the role of a villain against her will, imbued with powers that she didn't want. And now she suddenly has to try to find a way to save the world. This is compounded by the fact that every time she's tried to do something, it's always gone wrong. Her friends have died. Every time that she fought alongside Simon Baz, he constantly told her that she was getting in the way. This is really just her anger at the world coming to fruition. But more so than that, this is Sam Humphries telling us that while Simon Baz may very well have powers under the control of the Green Lantern that make him very formidable, Jessica Cruz is not someone to walk over. That once she's able to harness her abilities to the full potential that she has, she will be a force to be reckoned with. Now, whether or not this means that she'll rise to become the most powerful of the Green Lanterns is something that we can only really wait to see. Only time will tell. But at this moment right now, she takes on Simon Baz with very little effort and is actually able to overcome him pretty quickly. And so this basically gives us a situation under the writing of Sam Humphries where the two of them kind of come together. It sort of begins to mend this rift. Again, Jessica's main focus is her lack of confidence. And so Simon Baz more or less comes to her aid and says, yes, you screwed up. Yes, you made a mistake. Yes, you were not able to save your sister. Yes, you have been influenced by Volthoom. Yes, you saw your friends die. Yes, you lack confidence and you don't know why you are a Green Lantern, but you're strong. As a fundamental character on a fundamental basis, she is extremely strong. She took on Simon Baz, just like any other Lantern would, and was actually able to overcome him. And so, again, while this doesn't mean that the two of them are going to become the closest allies of all time, what it does mean is that the two of them are working better together. Now, the other half of this is that there was a little bit of ulterior motive here with Simon Baz, and the reason why is because when Hal Jordan made them the Green Lanterns of Earth, he forced them to share a power battery, meaning that Simon Baz cannot power his ring without Jessica Cruz, and Jessica Cruz cannot charge her ring without Simon Baz. They need to be able to create a battery together in order to charge their respective rings. And so because Simon's ring had been running low on power, he needed Jessica Cruz to return to sanity and to charge her ring or create a battery so they could both charge their rings at the same time. But this doesn't really take away from what Simon Baz was saying. It doesn't take away from the fact that he believes that Jessica Cruz will become a strong Green Lantern. The issue is just, will she be able to muster up the courage and the confidence in order to pull it off? And so once the two of them basically go about solving their own individual problems, once they get past this rift, we end up picking up with the two of them attacking the Hell Tower. Now again, this emerald sight that Simon Baz has is again kind of left ambiguous here. We don't know if this is the future. We don't know if this is another reality. It seems as though it's the future because he has a vision of the core Justice League members, the most formidable heroes of Barry Allen, of Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, Aquaman, Cyborg, all being succumbed by the rage of the Red Lanterns and taking it to the planet Earth, presumably conquering it. And so while he tries to overcome these visions, again, he basically goes against the forces of Atrocitus as they try to attack the Hell Tower and try to keep the Earth protected. Now, one of the cool things about this, and this is one of the things that I like, is that this is basically Jessica Cruz finding her place in the universe. One of the most important things, or one of the most important aspects of life is kind of like a trial by fire, in the sense that people don't really find out who they are until they're backed into a corner and they're made to fight for who they are. And this is what happened with Jessica Cruz. Because of the fact that Jessica Cruz is watching Simon Baz, presumably being tortured by Atrocitus or being attacked by Atrocitus, she initially succumbs to her fear. It seems as though she's giving up, that she's allowing everything that terrifies her, all the terrible experiences, to overcome her in her entirety. And because she backs away, because she just basically runs and hides, she has to face the fact that Simon Baz may very well die because of her. But this actually comes crashing down. This begins to come to an end when she has this conversation with herself. And this is why I say Sam Humphries is such a good writer when it comes to the story, because he gives us this amazing monologue. He gives us this instance where Jessica Cruz kind of flashes back to her time when she was held up in her apartment, when she says that she lived that life of believing she was incapable of doing anything. She lived her life when she believed that she was incapable of being successful. And the reason why this is done so well is because a lot of us have felt this way over the course of our life. A lot of us have had a really bad experience. Maybe we've had a breakup. Maybe we had, bad circumstances with our parents, but whatever reason, we've sat down and we felt like we just cannot succeed. No matter what we do, all we ever do is screw up, and we never catch a break. Things always go bad. But Jessica Cruz, this part of the story, is designed to sort of bring us up as individuals who are reading this story, to more or less make the case that when things seem at their worst, there's always a way out. And this is what Jessica Cruz realizes. She basically sees her willpower increasing and she sparks a construct. She creates a construct for the very first time. It's not mass massive in scale. It's not some great big huge giant weapon or anything like that, but the fact that she was able to make a construct in her mind solidifies the fact that she's meant to be a Green Lantern. There's a reason she was chosen, and that's all she needed. That's all she needed to basically pep back up again, jump back into the fray, and start taking it to Atrocitus alongside Simon Baz. And this is exactly what happens. The two of them begin going against the forces of Atrocitus and seem to essentially take out Atrocitus, or at the very least, run his forces off. Now again, the conclusion of this battle is not meant to be an end-all be-all. That is to say, Sam Humphries isn't saying, well, this is it, you know, the Red Lanterns have been defeated now and they're never coming back. He's of course leaving it open for future stories. But the fact remains here that this basically gives us as the reader verification that Simon Baz and Jessica Cruz are strong Green Lanterns. They're capable of holding the planet Earth against the forces of Atrocitus. And so what happens is that at the conclusion of this, because of the fact that Jessica Cruz made a construct, she tells Simon this. You know, she tells Simon, I made a construct for the very first time. And Simon Baz welcomes her as a partner, welcomes her as an equal. And so again, this is basically just Sam Humphries showing us that they're coming together, that they're basically becoming a team. This is our introduction to the characters, to see them, you know, form a stronger bond, you know, as a team, as opposed to something, you know, romantic, and in the end become Green Lanterns of the planet Earth. And so of course, because the Hell Tower had been destroyed, you know, we see that Jessica Cruz's sister returns and so on, but we also end up seeing Simon Baz travel back to his home. And this is where Sam Humphries leaves us on a cliffhanger with this particular story arc. This is why I'm so excited to see what happens. But because of the fact that they show up, while they're not the particular people this Guardian would want to talk to, but what he says is that he's traveled 1 billion light years, that he's been hunted by a myriad of alien empires, that he was cast out by the original Guardians of the universe for what he presents to them as being the Phantom Ring. Now, what this Phantom Ring does, we don't know, but in the next story arc picking up, this is supposed to bring an explanation to us. But if you guys enjoyed this Green Lanterns video, drop a like, hit the sub button, become proud of the Rob Corps, leave a comment, tell me what you guys think. And yeah, I love Green Lanterns. After reading this, I absolutely love Green Lanterns so far. But hopefully you guys found this as a good starting off point. This is a story I would highly suggest you guys check out. But yeah, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Now we'll catch you guys later. Peace.